The wind swept across the city's main street as if aimless, pushing dry leaves against the cracked pavement. The lights in the shop windows were still on, reflecting in old puddles of rain. People passed by talking loudly, laughing, commenting on things too small to matter. No one slowed their pace because of it. No one looked away, because no one was looking. The war veteran sat motionless on the wooden bench in front of the old pharmacy, as if he were part of the forgotten city landscape. A group passed by laughing. One of them pointed discreetly. Another shook his head disdainfully. To them, he was just another man worn down by time, someone who hadn't kept up with the world, invisible, underestimated, effortlessly ignored. They didn't know that, in that city, they were about to make a mistake. The veteran didn't react. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't change his posture. He simply observed. His eyes followed reflections in the shop windows, the rhythm of the footsteps, the way one of the boys glanced over his shoulder too quickly before crossing the street. Small details, things that no one else noticed, things that, in other places and other times, meant the difference between returning home or not returning. The lamppost above him flickered twice, erratically. A car remained running too long across the street, its headlights off. A metallic sound echoed where it shouldn't. The city continued its routine, all too normal, too confident in its own predictability. For everyone else, it was just another ordinary night in the American Midwest. For the silent veteran, it was a warning. He remained there, motionless, while the wind, footsteps, and voices continued their course. The silence around him was not emptiness. It was calculated. He was not there by chance. And even without knowing it, everyone around him was already part of something that had not yet begun, but was very close to beginning. The war veteran lived on the outskirts of the city, where the asphalt began to crumble into gravel, and the noise faded as if the world were giving up on continuing. The house didn't attract attention. It had no high fences, no flags, no signs of presence. It was functional, discreet, almost invisible, like him. Whoever passed by there every day might never realize that someone lived in that place. He always woke up before sunrise, not because of insomnia, but out of habit. His body had learned years ago that waiting too long was a risk. The silence of the early morning was the only time when the city demanded nothing of him. No curious glances, no questions, no expectations. Only the distant sound of the wind rustling through dry branches, and sometimes the creaking of some old structure succumbing to the cold. His routine was precise, not rigid, but controlled. Simple coffee, always the same. The cup positioned in the same spot on the table. He didn't need to look to know where things were. Everything had a defined place, not out of obsession, but because predictability was a form of defense. He already knew chaos too well. When he left home, he chose times when the streets were almost empty. He knew exactly when the traffic increased and when it decreased. He observed patterns that no one had taught him to observe. Who left too early, who left too late, who changed their route for no apparent reason. It wasn't suspicion, it was reading the atmosphere. Something that had never left him. In the city, few knew his name. Some recognized him only as the veteran, others as that quiet man. He never corrected anyone. He never introduced himself. He didn't care to be remembered. Invisibility was comfortable, safe. He had learned over time that being seen didn't always mean being understood. He worked when he needed to. Small jobs, simple repairs, things that didn't require explanations or create bonds. He preferred manual labor, where silence was acceptable, where no one expected stories, where his hands could be occupied while his mind remained alert. He observed while he worked. He always observed. There were times when people spoke to him as if he weren't there, incoherent comments, poorly disguised jokes. Assumptions about his life, his sanity, his past. He never reacted, not because he didn't hear, but because he chose not to respond. To respond, he knew, was to open a door that might never close again. Sometimes someone would ask if he had served. The answer would come short, a nod, just one word. Yes. Nothing more. He never specified where, when, or how, not out of shame, but because certain things couldn't be contained in simple sentences, and he didn't owe anyone explanations. The veteran spent a lot of time observing the city without participating in it. He sat in strategic places, from where he could see entrances, exits, movements, public benches, tables set apart in diners, the edge of parking lots. He seemed distracted. He never was. His eyes captured more than they showed, always 2 steps ahead of the obvious. At night, the house would close itself off from the world again. Low lights. Curtains partially open, just enough to see, never to be seen. He didn't watch television often. He preferred ambient sound. The silence interrupted only by what truly mattered. A car passing too slowly. A sound that didn't match the time of day. A rhythm out of the ordinary. Sleep came in short bursts, never too deep, never completely absent. He slept as if keeping 1 foot out the door. When he woke in the middle of the night, he wasn't startled. He simply listened, felt, assessed. His body remained ready, even when his mind tried to rest. There were no photos scattered around the house, no prominent portraits, just 1 or 2 objects stored out of sight, medals inside a closed box, documents carefully folded. They weren't trophies. They were memories he had chosen not to revisit often. The past was there, but not in control. He didn't frequent bars. He didn't gather in groups. He didn't seek validation. Solitude wasn't a punishment. It was a strategic choice. He knew that in groups, people become too predictable and dangerously distracted. Alone, he maintained control. Still, he wasn't cold. He watched children playing attentively. He discreetly helped when he saw someone in difficulty without expecting thanks. A quick gesture, a minimal intervention. Then he disappeared again. For him, humanity didn't need an audience. The city saw him as someone broken by time. A man who had lost something and never recovered it. They were wrong. He wasn't broken. He was calibrated. Every silence, every choice, every retreat was part of an internal system built over years in environments where making mistakes cost lives. The veteran didn't live waiting for something to happen, but he knew how to recognize when something was about to happen. And during that period, something was starting to feel out of place. Small changes, too many people at the wrong times, repetitive movements, glances that were too quick to mean anything. He noticed. He didn't comment. He didn't react. He continued living his routine as always, because acting too soon was as dangerous as acting too late. And while the city continued to believe he was just another forgotten man on the fringes of the map, the silent veteran was internally adjusting something that had never stopped working. He was watching. He was waiting. And he knew that the silence would be broken sooner or later. Before the veteran the city learned to ignore existed, before the heavy silence that now follows him like a shadow, there was a time when he was just an ordinary man. Back then, few noticed him either, but for different reasons. His name was Thomas Hale, although almost everyone simply called him Tom, a simple name, easy to forget, and perhaps for that very reason, suitable for someone who never sought to be seen. Tom grew up in a small town, not unlike the one where he lives now. Streets too wide for the number of people, houses with old wooden porches, American flags hanging from lampposts that creaked in the wind. From an early age, he learned to observe before speaking. While other children ran, shouted, and asserted themselves, Tom preferred to stand still for a few extra seconds, attentive to details that no one seemed to consider important. The sound of a car slowing down too quickly, the way an adult changed their tone of voice when lying, the way silence settled before an argument. He wasn't shy. He never was. He simply understood, intuitively, that speaking less meant listening more, and listening more almost always meant surviving better. At home, the environment was simple and functional. His father worked long hours, a man of few words and restrained gestures. His mother kept the routine running smoothly, as if silence were a natural part of the family structure. There were no grand speeches about values or courage. These things were demonstrated in small actions, getting up early, keeping promises, not complaining about what couldn't be changed. Tom absorbed all of this without realizing it. He didn't need explanations. He saw it. He always saw it. At school, he went unnoticed. Teachers described him as attentive but distant. He never caused problems. He never drew attention. His classmates rarely remembered to invite him to anything, not out of malice, but because he seemed comfortable on the sidelines. And indeed he was. The sidelines offered a clearer view of the whole picture. From there, Tom learned how people really functioned when they believed they weren't being observed. It was during this period that he began to develop something that would later save his life and cost others. A kind of silent reading of the environment, an instinctive understanding of patterns. He perceived when something was out of place before the problem manifested itself. He couldn't explain how. He just felt it. A slight tightness in his chest, an almost imperceptible change in the rhythm around him. An internal alert that made no noise, but never failed. When the time came to decide his future, the military path didn't emerge as an act of impulsive bravery or a desire for glory. For Tom, it was almost inevitable. The structure, the discipline, the clarity of function, it all made sense. Serving wasn't a romantic ideal. It was a natural extension of who he had always been. Someone willing to silently assume responsibility. Upon joining the military, Tom didn't change. He simply found an environment that finally valued what he had always known how to do. Observe. Wait. Act only when necessary. While others sought to stand out, he absorbed procedures, studied behaviors, and analyzed human reactions under pressure. His superiors noticed his reliability, even if they rarely commented on it. He was the kind of soldier who didn't need to be reminded of the rules. He was already alert even before the order was given. Even before the war, something within him already carried weight. Not trauma, not yet, but awareness. The notion that ignored decisions, neglected signs, and misinterpreted silences had consequences. Tom understood this deeply, even without having seen the battlefield, perhaps because he had always lived paying attention to what others chose to ignore. And when he was finally sent to war, he didn't remain silent there. It was war would only teach us the price of that, and the cost of not being heard when it mattered most. But back then, before the distant explosions, before the names etched in memory as absences, Thomas Hale was still just an attentive man, walking through a world that spoke too loudly to notice the warnings he never stopped seeing. And that, even before the war, already set him apart from everyone else. War did not enter the life of Thomas Hale like an immediate bang. It settled in gradually, just as silence had always settled in him, without asking permission, without clear warning, without the possibility of return. Before the first real confrontation, before the losses, before the profound exhaustion, there was an almost imperceptible change in his perception of the world. Sounds began to carry more meaning, the voids between them even more so. On the battlefield, Tom quickly learned that danger rarely presented itself in an obvious way. It didn't always come with shouts, gunshots, or sudden movements. Often it arose when everything seemed too calm, when the environment was unusually organized, when the silence didn't match the scene. This kind of silence wasn't tranquility. It was preparation. It was expectation. And Tom felt it even before he could formulate the reason. He observed the ground more attentively than the others. The placement of objects, the way the wind blew the dust, the absence of birds where they should be. Small details that didn't appear in reports or formal training. These details didn't scream. They didn't fit, and Tom always had difficulty ignoring what didn't fit in. In the first few months, he tried to alert his superiors carefully. Few words, direct sentences. He didn't dramatize. He didn't exaggerate. But the battlefield had no patience for silent warnings. Many preferred to trust what was visible, measurable, confirmed by equipment. The problem is that not everything that kills can be detected by sensors. There was one particular patrol, on a narrow road surrounded by uneven terrain, that became a permanent mark on his memory. The place seemed clear. No movement. No obvious sign of threat. The other soldiers gradually relaxed. Quiet conversations began to emerge. Someone commented on something banal, trying to ease the tension. Tom, however, noticed something wrong almost immediately. The marks on the ground were too recent. The silence was excessive. The air felt heavy, as if the environment itself were waiting. He paused for a moment. He thought about speaking. He assessed the moment. He weighed the risk of seeming paranoid, the cost of interrupting the flow, the weight of being wrong. That hesitation, too brief to be noticed by anyone else, was enough. The explosion didn't kill everyone, but it injured enough to teach Tom something he would never forget. The time between realizing and acting is where lives are decided. After that day, he never again ignored an inner warning, even when no one else noticed, even when his observations were met with impatience or disbelief. He learned that being ignored was part of the process. The problem wasn't being discredited. The problem was what happened when the mistake was confirmed too late. The losses began to accumulate silently. Comrades who were there one day and gone the next. Some spoke loudly to hide their fear. Others feigned normalcy. Some simply disappeared, leaving behind only equipment and incomplete memories. Tom didn't need to close his eyes to remember them. All it took was the wrong silence. All it took was an overly calm environment. The trauma the war left on Tom wasn't explosive. It was functional. He didn't suffer from constant flashbacks or visible breakdowns. What he carried was something harder to explain. A mind that never switched off even during the rare moments of rest. His brain continued analyzing, cataloging, comparing patterns, searching for inconsistencies. His body might relax for a few minutes, but his attention remained active. There were nights when he would wake up without knowing exactly why. No clear nightmares, no specific memories, just the feeling that something was wrong. The same silent warning he felt on the field. Sometimes there was nothing. Other times, there was. And this unpredictability was exhausting. In a later operation, near the end of his time in the war, Tom identified strange behavior in an area considered safe. He raised the alarm. He insisted a little more than usual. He was listened to reluctantly. The operation was postponed for a few hours. What was found afterward confirmed his suspicions. No celebration, no explicit acknowledgement. Just an awkward silence. Tom learned there that, even when he was right, silence remained his only answer. The war did not silence him. She made her silence heavier. Each ignored observation added a layer of restraint. Each delayed warning reinforced the need to control not only the environment, but himself. He learned to swallow his words, to measure each sentence, to accept that not every danger can be avoided, even when perceived. When the return finally happened, Tom felt something close to displacement. The city, the streets, the people, everything seemed excessively confident. People spoke loudly. They ignored obvious signs. They trusted too much in normalcy. For Tom, this wasn't peace. It was distraction. He tried to adapt. He tried to slow down his mind. He tried to trust that the danger was behind him, but his body wouldn't forget. The domestic silence wasn't the same as the battlefield, but it carried enough echoes to keep him alert. A car parked strangely, a group laughing too loudly, a pattern that didn't repeat itself correctly. Everything was analyzed, even without conscious intention. Tom came to understand over time that the greatest legacy of the war was not fear. It was responsibility. The responsibility of perceiving what others do not perceive, and the weight of knowing that, often, that is not enough. He returned home with scars no one saw. No grand stories to tell, no speeches. Only the certainty that the world keeps functioning even when it ignores its own warnings. And that silence, when underestimated, inevitably exacts its price. Thomas Hale learned all of this far from the quiet town where he now lives. But what he learned in the war never stayed there. He brought it with him. And even while trying to remain invisible, he knows, just as he always has, when something is about to spiral out of control. Silence remains their clearest warning. What draws attention to Thomas Hale doesn't come as a shock. There's no sudden noise, no abrupt movement, nothing that would force an ordinary person to stop. That's exactly what makes it impossible for him to ignore. The detail doesn't scream. It simply does not belong. It all begins on a morning too ordinary to warrant any concern. The city awakens at its usual pace. Doors open, engines start, footsteps cross familiar sidewalks. The sky is clear, the wind is light, and nothing in the air suggests urgency. For most people, it's just another day repeating the previous one. For Tom, this excessive repetition is, in itself, a sign that deserves attention. He sits on a bench near the main street, observing without seeming to observe. It's an old habit. He doesn't fix his gaze on anyone for too long. He doesn't react. He shows no interest. He simply absorbs. The same people pass by on the same paths. The same schedules repeat themselves until something slightly disrupts this silent order. A man crosses the street outside his usual spot. He doesn't run. He doesn't seem nervous. He just changes his pattern. Tom follows him out of the corner of his eye without moving his head. The man stops near a shop window, pretends to observe something, but doesn't really look. His eyes are fixed on the reflection, not the object on display. Tom recognizes this behavior, not as a direct threat, not yet, but as disguised observation. Minutes later, a pickup truck parks where it doesn't normally park. It's not badly positioned. It doesn't block the way. It just occupies a space that's usually empty at that time. The driver doesn't get out immediately. The engine stays running for too long. To anyone else, this means nothing. To Tom, it's a sequence beginning to form. He stands up calmly, not on impulse, not out of curiosity, simply because remaining seated would make it harder to confirm what his mind is beginning to map out. He walks slowly, keeping enough distance not to appear interested. The inner silence deepens. There is no anxiety. There is focus. As he passes a corner, he notices a young woman standing near a lamppost, repeatedly looking at her cell phone but not typing. She doesn't seem lost. She seems waiting for something that never arrives. Her body is too tense for someone who's just bored. Her shoulders are raised. Her weight shifts from one foot to the other. Tom doesn't look at her. He just takes it in. The detail that confirms everything comes soon after, too small to attract anyone's attention. A brief hand signal, not a wave, not a clear gesture. Just a short movement, directed towards the pickup truck. The response comes in the form of a headlight, flashing once. Tom pauses for a moment. Not because you're surprised, but because the pattern is now complete enough to warrant extra caution. He doesn't yet know what's about to happen. But he knows that something is being prepared, and she knows, most importantly, that nobody around noticed anything. He watches people passing between these invisible points of tension. Children laughing, couples talking, a man arguing about trivialities on the phone, all moving within a normality too fragile to sustain what is forming. The silent injustice is not just against him, it is against everyone who walks by unaware. Tom senses the old conflict resurfacing, not dramatically, but practically. The question isn't, should I act? The question is, when does taking action cease to be a choice and become an obligation? He knows the cost of intervening too early. He also knows the price of waiting too long. He decides to observe more closely, not out of cowardice, as a method. He changes his position once more, crossing the street at a moment when the flow of people makes him invisible. Now he can see the side of the pickup truck. The passenger door opens just enough for someone to look out. He doesn't get out, he just checks the surroundings. He closes it again. The young woman near the lamppost moves a few meters away, as if she had given up waiting. But Tom notices that she isn't going anywhere specific. She's simply changing her angle. The observation continues, only from a different position. This confirms what he already suspected. There is coordination. Tom's heart doesn't race. His breathing remains controlled. His body responds as it always has when something starts to go wrong. He feels the same clarity he felt before the most dangerous patrols. His mind enters a specific, silent state, where every detail takes on its exact weight, neither more nor less. He approaches a closed shop and stops as if he were just resting. From the reflection in the glass, he observes everything without being noticed. Now he can see another man emerging from the opposite side of the street. This one walks with trained ease. He doesn't quicken his pace. He doesn't look around in an obvious way. He simply positions himself. 3 points, 3 people, 1 vehicle, an odd time interval. It's not a crime in progress yet. It is the omen, the kind of situation that, if ignored, becomes irreversible in a matter of minutes. Tom thinks about leaving. The idea comes clearly enough to be considered. He could cross the street, go home, let the city remain the responsibility of those who chose not to see. Nobody called him. Nobody asked for help. He owes nothing to anyone there. This thought isn't burdened with guilt. It's burdened with logic. But then something changes. A fourth element enters the equation. A boy. He can't be more than 12 years old. He appears running, distracted, with something in his hands, crossing exactly the space where all the invisible lines intersect. He doesn't notice anything. There's no way he could notice. For him, it's just another everyday journey. Tom's inner silence deepens. There is no panic. A decision is slowly forming. He understands in that instant that the time for mere observation is running out. It is not yet the moment to act. But it is no longer the time to pretend that nothing is happening. He adjusts his posture slightly. Nothing flashy. Just enough to be ready. His eyes follow the boy until he's out of the critical point. Only then does Tom allow the air to leave his lungs with a little more force, not as relief, as a time marker. The triggering event is not an explicit request. It's not a cry. It's not a clear emergency. It is the silent confirmation that normality is about to break down. And once again, Tom is the only one who seems to see this clearly enough. He knows that, from that moment on, he can no longer unsee what he saw. He can even choose not to act. But that choice will have a weight he knows all too well. The same weight he carried from the war to his home, the weight of knowing that silence warns before chaos. And now, the silence is warning us again. Thomas Hale doesn't decide to act all at once. The decision doesn't happen like a click, nor like a heroic impulse. It builds in layers, silent, heavy, almost invisible. First comes the acceptance that what he saw is no coincidence. Then, the most difficult realization, no one but him seems willing or able to perceive what is about to happen. He remains motionless for a few seconds longer than necessary. Not because he hesitates, but because he measures. He measures the space. He measures the time. He measures the people. Every step he takes from that point needs to be justified not by courage, but by necessity. The war taught him that too early. Acting unnecessarily is noise. Acting too late is guilt. The atmosphere remains normal, perhaps too normal. A couple walks by discussing something trivial. A car honks in the distance. A shop bell rings as someone enters. Common, everyday sounds that create a false layer of security. Beneath this layer, however, something moves in a coordinated, patient way, almost too respectful of the city's silence. Tom changes position again. Not to get closer to the danger, but to interposeto him. The difference is subtle, but fundamental. He doesn't go towards those involved. He places himself between them and that which could be lost. It's an ancient gesture, learned long before Millbrook Falls existed in his life. A gesture that doesn't draw attention because it doesn't seem like a gesture at all. He walks over to the boy who had been crossing the area moments before. The boy is now standing near a bicycle, adjusting something on the handlebars. Tom doesn't speak to him immediately. He just stops close enough for his presence to create a slight alteration in the space. An extra body, a discrete obstacle, something that wasn't anticipated. The man near the shop window notices this, not obviously. Just a slight tightening of his jaw, an almost imperceptible adjustment of posture. The pickup truck remains running. The young woman near the lamppost looks at her cell phone again, but now the gesture is slightly out of sync. Tom sees everything. He leans slightly toward the boy, like someone about to ask a simple question. When he speaks, his voice is low, controlled, almost neutral. Your tire looks loose. There is no urgency in the phrase. There is no warning. There is no order. Just a banal, everyday observation that forces the boy to stop what he was doing and look at the bicycle attentively. The boy responds with a distracted, "Ah," bends down, spins the wheel. He remains there. This small delay changes everything. Time begins to stretch. The kind of stretching Tom recognizes immediately, when plans need to adapt, when coordination starts to fail. He doesn't look directly at any of the observers, but he senses their focus shifting. Now there's a new element in the scene. A man who shouldn't be there, a delay that wasn't in the script. Tom isn't proud of it. He doesn't feel the adrenaline rush. He feels responsibility. The responsibility of keeping the delay going long enough for the situation to resolve itself, or for him to need to do something more. He stays by the boy's side for a few more seconds. He talks about nothing important. He asks if he lives nearby. The boy replies with short, disinterested phrases. To him, it's just a strange adult being polite. For Tom, each second is a controlled eternity. The man in the shop window walks away, not abruptly. He just changes direction. The young woman near the lamppost puts away her cell phone. The truck's headlights go out. The engine continues running, but now there's hesitation. Tom notices the first clear sign of retreat. Not total, partial. The kind of retreat that happens when something gets out of control without it being possible to identify exactly why. But the danger is not gone yet. The truck driver opens the door and gets out. He doesn't look directly at Tom. He looks at the boy, then at the street, then at the surroundings. He assesses. Tom feels the old weight in his chest. The weight of knowing that if that person takes one more step, the time to simply delay is over. Tom adjusts his body position, not in a threatening way. He simply moves slightly forward, blocking the direct line between the man and the boy. His relaxed shoulders conceal the muscular readiness that never went away. He keeps his hands visible. Nothing aggressive, nothing defensive, just presence. When the man finally looks at him, there is a brief moment of silent recognition. Not personal recognition, but recognition of type something in Tom's eyes, in the way he occupies the space, communicates a message without words. This is not going to be easy. Neither of them speaks. The silence stretches for seconds that seem too long to be comfortable. People continue to pass by, oblivious to the invisible tension that settles between those two men. It is in this contrast that the humanity of Tom's gesture becomes clearer. He doesn't create chaos, he avoids it. The driver gives a half smile, too fake to be convincing. He says something banal, some excuse about being lost. Tom just nods slowly. He doesn't contradict, he doesn't confront, he simply accepts the explanation as one accepts a story one doesn't intend to believe. "Good afternoon," Tom says, with the same neutrality. 2 words, no accusation, no threat. Just enough to mark human territory, to say I am here. The man hesitates once more. Then he closes the truck door. The engine roars a little louder. The vehicle drives away slowly, blending into the regular city traffic. The young woman and the other man have already disappeared into the crowd. Tom remains there for a few more moments. He doesn't relax immediately. Experience has taught him that danger doesn't always go away when it seems to. He watches until the pattern completely dissolves. Only then does he turn back to the boy. "There," he says, pointing to the bicycle. "Now hold it better." The boy thanks him without fully understanding why. He gets on his bicycle and rides away, pedaling as if nothing had happened. For him, nothing happened, and that's precisely the point. Tom is alone again. The weight on his chest doesn't disappear. It never disappears. But something changes, not outside, inside. That old conflict between invisibility and responsibility settles for a moment. He didn't save the world. He didn't prevent anything grand. Perhaps he didn't even prevent anything concrete, but intervened with humanity precisely, in the only spot where his presence could make a difference without disrupting the normalcy of everyone around him. He feels the fatigue arriving late, as always happens after a prolonged state of alertness. It's not physical, it's emotional. The kind of fatigue that comes from knowing that he still sees things he'd rather not see. That he still possesses a mind trained to detect threats, even when no one asks for it. Tom slowly walks away, blending back into the city that stubbornly refuses to acknowledge how much it depends on people like him to continue appearing safe. He doesn't expect recognition. He doesn't expect gratitude. He never has. But as he walks, a certainty settles in with uncomfortably clear clarity. This was not an isolated event. It was a warning, a first move. Something in that city has begun to shift, and the mere delay it caused will not be enough next time. He knows this. And he also knows that when the next decision comes, the cost of remaining invisible will be even greater. Silence returns around him. But now, it weighs more. When night finally falls completely over Millbrook Falls, Thomas Hale realizes that something has changed inside him irreversibly. Not abruptly, not like a snap, but like a constant pressure that builds up slowly, silently, until it becomes impossible to ignore. He's felt this before, many times, always before something that couldn't be undone. The city continues to function as always. The same lights come on at the same times. Cars pass by with the predictability of an old habit. People enter houses that seem too protected to notice what moves outside. For anyone else, that night would be indistinguishable from hundreds of others. For Tom, it carries a different weight. A weight that doesn't come from what happened, but from what it didn't happen. And what might still happen. He tries to convince himself that he did enough. He intervened when necessary. He prevented the worst. No one got hurt. No authorities needed to be involved. No spotlight was shone on him. On paper, everything worked perfectly. But Tom doesn't live on paper. He lives in memory. And memory doesn't accept incomplete solutions. While preparing a coffee, he doesn't want to drink. His mind begins to revisit old decisions, choices made in completely different contexts, but guided by the same logic. Act the minimum necessary to maintain control, avoid chaos, preserve lives without drawing attention. This strategy worked in war. It worked because the chaos was explicit, because the enemy was identified, because the danger had a face, a uniform, a pattern. Here it doesn't. Here, the danger is diffuse. It blends into everyday life. It hides behind common gestures, innocent routines, people who don't know they are in the way of something bigger. This is the real conflict, not knowing where normality ends and threat begins. Tom sits at the kitchen table and remains there for long minutes, staring into nothingness. The distant sound of a train crosses the city, slow and heavy. The same sound he heard in other cities, in other countries, before nights that ended badly. His body reacts before his mind. His muscles tense. His breathing changes. He hates this. He hates how his body refuses to forget. He thought time would solve it. He thought that, far from the battlefield, his mind would adapt to ordinary life. But the problem was never the environment. The problem is that he learned to see the world in a way that cannot be unlearned. He sees patterns where others see coincidences. He notices minute changes that go unnoticed. And now, those perceptions are beginning to align again. The intervention with the boy was not an isolated event. Tom understands this with uncomfortable clarity. It was a symptom, a sign that something is out of place. And the most disturbing thing is not the possibility of danger. It's the fact that, if something actually happens, he will know that he could have done more. This awareness begins to erode his attempt to remain invisible. He remembers how many times, in the past, he ignored signs because he believed it wasn't his responsibility. How many times he trusted others to do what needed to be done. How many times it ended in absolute silence, in cold reports, in names that never returned home. Each of these memories returns now not as clear images, but as physical sensations. The tightness in his stomach, the weight on his shoulders, the fatigue that doesn't go away with sleep. Tom gets up and walks around the house, as if the movement could dissipate the conflict. It doesn't work. The conflict isn't in the space, it's inside him. It's in the struggle between the man he became to survive and the man he tries to be to continue living. Being invisible has always been her protection. Invisibility means fewer questions, less judgment, less involvement. But invisibility also means to attend it means bearing the burden of seeing something wrong and choosing not to interfere beyond what is necessary. And that choice is starting to seem increasingly unsustainable. He looks at his hands. Hands that once held weapons but now avoid anything that resembles confrontation. Not out of fear, but out of weariness. A weariness that is not physical, it is moral. It is the weariness of always being one step ahead, always perceiving things first, always bearing the consequences later. The larger conflict deepens when Tom realizes that this is no longer just a specific event. It's a trend, small changes in people's behavior. A subtle increase in city tension. A collective feeling of unease that no one verbalizes. He notices it in glances, in the way conversations cease too quickly, in how people avoid certain topics without knowing exactly why. He knows that if he decides to act more consistently, there will be no turning back. It will no longer be possible to pretend to be just a veteran trying to lead an ordinary life. He will become an active element in the fragile balance of that city, and that brings risks he knows all too well: isolation, distrust, rejection. Society only likes heroes after everything ends well. During the process, they are inconvenient. Tom sits down again, now with the clear feeling that he is trapped between two equally exhausting paths. One leads to conscious omission, the other leads to inevitable involvement. Neither offers peace, only different kinds of guilt. His mind begins to work silently, evaluating scenarios, possibilities, consequences. He hates this part. He hates how his brain transforms human lives into variables, into probabilities. But that's how he survived before. That's how he knows how to function. And the fact that it still functions this way is what scares him the most. He closes his eyes and tries to remember why he decided to walk away from it all. He remembers the sleepless nights, the wrong decisions, the lives lost despite all his efforts. He remembers the promise he made to himself never again to carry alone the burden of protecting people who don't know they need protection. But now, sitting in that silent house, he understands something he has avoided for a long time. The promise was impossible from the start, because as long as he continues to see what others don't see, the responsibility will never cease to exist. He can ignore it, he can postpone it, but he can't pretend it's not there. The conflict reaches its deepest point when Tom accepts, albeit reluctantly, that his presence in Millbrook Falls is not accidental. He didn't choose to realize all of this, but he does. And this realization demands an answer, even if he doesn't yet know what it is. Night wears on. The silence grows heavier. Tom remains motionless, as if waiting for something. Not a sound, not an event, but an inner confirmation. Something to tell him he can continue as he is. That confirmation doesn't come. The major conflict is definitively established there. To act means to revive what he tried to bury. To not act means to accept that others will pay the price. There is no right choice, only possible choices. When he finally gets up to go to sleep, he knows his sleep will be shallow. He knows the decision hasn't been made yet, but he also knows the process has already begun. And as he learned the hard way, once started, that process never stops on its own. The silence of that house that night is not rest. It's preparation. Thomas Hale realizes this even before he can explain why. For years, he had grown accustomed to the city's silence, the common, predictable, domesticated silence. The kind of quiet that accompanies empty streets after 10 o'clock, darkened shop windows, dogs sleeping in yards surrounded by fences too low to truly protect anyone. But that night, the silence wasn't simply present. It was loaded. Thomas sits at the kitchen table, his coffee cup untouched in his hands. The liquid has cooled, but he doesn't notice. His eyes aren't focused on anything specific. They scan the room as they did on the battlefield, not seeking comfort, but invisible threats. Each shadow seems to occupy too much space. Each distant creak seems out of place in time. He feels his body tired in a different way. It's not the physical tiredness of the muscles. It's a deep, internal weariness, accumulated over years of emotional suppression. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't improve with sleep. Something is pressing on his mind, insistent, repetitive. A thought he's been trying to push away ever since he decided to act in the previous event. It's not fear of what might happen. It's fear of what it has already begun. Thomas slowly closes his eyes, as if that could rearrange the world. It doesn't work. Memories don't arrive as clear images. They never arrive. They arrive as bodily sensations, the stiffness in his shoulders, the clenched jaw, the instinct to listen before looking. He remembers the same kind of silence in another place, another time. A silence that deceived, a silence that preceded losses. He gets up and walks to the window. The street is empty, lit only by old lampposts that flicker faintly, as if they too were tired. Thomas observes the details: A car parked out of alignment, a door that should be closed but isn't. The distant sound of something metallic being dragged that fades too quickly to be confirmed. All of this would be irrelevant to anyone else. For him, it is. That's exactly how it begins. The breaking point isn't caused by a single trigger. It builds up when Thomas realizes he is reliving the same emotional pattern that almost destroyed him in the past. The silent certainty that something is wrong, combined with the feeling that nobody wants to listen. He steps away from the window and rests his hands on the kitchen counter. He takes a deep breath. Once, twice, 3 times. He tries to apply the logic he learned after the war, separating the present from the past, reality from memory. But something doesn't fit. The weight on his chest doesn't lessen. On the contrary, with each attempt to rationalize, he feels the pressure increase. The rift deepens when Thomas admits something he had always avoided putting into words, even internally. He's not prepared to fail again. Not in an external sense, in a moral sense. He remembers faces that never returned, voices that fell silent too soon, moments when he saw clear and precise signs, and yet he still had to obey, wait, trust in decisions that weren't his own. The guilt didn't come from the wrong action. It came from forced inaction. Now, in that town too small to hide big problems, he feels the same trap forming. The same dilemma: to intervene or remain invisible, to act or observe, to speak or endure. Thomas slowly slides into the chair and sits down, resting his elbows on his knees. His head falls forward, his eyes fixed on the floor. He doesn't think about heroism. He doesn't think about saving anyone. He only thinks about the psychological cost of each possible choice and realizes, with painful clarity, that they all demand too high a price. Emotional breakdown happens without tears. He feels his throat tighten, his stomach clench. A heavy emptiness spreads through his chest, as if something were being forcibly removed. It is there that silence ceases to be a refuge and transforms into an accusation. Every second without action begins to weigh like a conscious choice. Thomas remembers who he became after the war. A man who built a small, controllable, predictable life. Not out of cowardice, but for survival. He reduced the world to what he could observe without needing to intervene. And it worked, until now. The rupture reaches its most cruel point when he realizes that isolation no longer protects you. On the contrary, he left him vulnerable, disconnected, with no room for emotional error. He gets up suddenly, as if his body had made the decision before his mind. He walks around the house, opening doors, turning on lights he didn't need to turn on. He's not looking for anything specific. He's just trying to move so he doesn't sink completely into that state. In one of the rooms he stops. He observes a simple, almost empty space. There are no photos, no mementos on display. He eliminated everything that could pull him back, and yet the past is there, present, occupying space within him. Thomas feels something close to despair. Not the noisy kind, but the silent, internal kind that makes time seem to slow down. He sits on the edge of the bed and rests his face in his hands for a few seconds. When he pulls them away, his eyes are red but dry. He understands, in that instant, that what is happening is not just about the external danger. It's about the inevitable confrontation with who he is now. A veteran who survived the war, but never managed to completely shut down the system that kept him alive. The breakup doesn't make you stronger. Thomas accepts, with an almost physical weight, that he cannot return to his previous state. Even if nothing happens. Even if he chooses not to act again. Something inside him has already broken. The illusion of absolute control. He returns to the room and sits down again, now motionless. Silence returns to dominate the atmosphere, but it is no longer the same. It carries meaning. It carries an imminent decision. Thomas looks at the clock on the wall. The hand moves slowly. Each passing second reinforces the feeling that his time is running out. He doesn't know when he will need to act. He doesn't know how. He only knows that, when the time comes, there will be no more room for hesitation. The moment of rupture ends like this, not with resolution, but with painful conscience. Awareness that observing in silence this time may not be enough. Awareness that the next choice will define not only the destiny of others, but also his own. And above all, the awareness that the price of remaining invisible may be greater than the price of being seen again. Thomas Hale already knew that moment would come. He didn't know the exact time, nor the precise shape, but he recognized the pattern with the same certainty with which he recognized his own reflection. There was something about the way the city air seemed denser that night. A tiny detail, almost invisible to anyone else, but impossible to ignore for someone who had spent years learning to distinguish the normal from the dangerously out of place. He was sitting inside the car, parked half a block from where everything converged. The engine was off. His hands rested on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed ahead, piercing through the windshield as if he could see beyond the empty street. There was no music. There never was. Silence was part of the process. It always had been. Thomas breathed slowly, not to calm himself, but to keep his body in a state of readiness without wasting unnecessary energy. The war had taught him that fatigue doesn't come from physical exertion, but from poorly controlled anticipation. Something was about to happen. He got out of the car without making a sound. The door was closed with excessive care, almost ritualistic. Thomas adjusted his jacket, not for aesthetic reasons, but out of habit. Every gesture had a function. Every movement carried a memory. As he walked, his eyes scanned the surroundings like sensors. Windows, posts, reflections, signs of presence. Everything seemed too normal. And that, in itself, was a warning sign. The climax didn't begin with a bang. It started with the confirmation. Thomas paused for a moment in the shadow of an old building, partially hidden by the darkness. From there, he observed unnoticed. He saw people who shouldn't have been there. He saw behaviors that didn't match the time of day. He saw the same human error repeated once again, the conviction that no one was watching. They didn't notice Thomas. His overcoming challenges always began before the action itself. It began in the mind. He calculated possible trajectories. He assessed risks. He weighed consequences. There was no emotion in this process, only clarity. Fear, if it existed, had been tamed long ago. What remained was responsibility. Thomas stepped forward when the situation reached the precise point of imbalance, not even before, so as not to expose oneself unnecessarily. Not even afterwards, so as not to allow the damage to become irreversible. He moved with silent precision, like someone who knows his own body so well that he doesn't need to think about it. His steps were firm, yet gentle. Each meter covered was a meter conquered without fanfare. By the time it was finally noticed, it was too late to react. There was no immediate direct confrontation. Thomas was never impulsive. He positioned himself in a way that disrupted the natural flow of the situation. He broke the dynamic. He created hesitation. Hesitation, he knew, was more powerful than any brute force. The others tried to understand what was happening. Thomas didn't explain. He didn't ask. He didn't threaten. His presence alone communicated something that didn't need words. His firm gaze, his stable posture, the complete absence of panic. Everything indicated someone who had been in worse situations and survived. The action unfolded in short fragments, almost imperceptible to an outside observer. A quick movement, a precise block, a positional adjustment, nothing spectacular, nothing overly cinematic, just efficiency. The climax was built on absolute control over the impending chaos. Thomas absorbed the tension of the environment as if it were part of him. Instead of allowing it to explode, he redistributed it. The conflict lost momentum because it lost direction. The danger dissipated because someone finally took control without needing to announce it. At no point did Thomas raise his voice. At no point did his face express anger. There was only total concentration. Time seemed strange. Not faster, not slower, just right. Each second fit into the next like silent gears in an old, reliable mechanism. When it was all over, there was no applause. There was confusion. And then silence. A silence, unlike the one that had marked Thomas's life for so many years. It wasn't the silence of indifference. It was the uncomfortable silence of someone who realized he had been wrong all along. The people around began to move away. Some avoided looking. Others stared too long. No one knew exactly what to say. Thomas didn't expect them to say anything. He stood there for a few extra seconds, analyzing the surroundings one last time, confirming that there was no longer any risk. Confirming that the threat had been neutralized, not by force, but by interruption at the right moment. That was the overcoming, not victory, containment. Thomas took a few steps back. Then he turned around. He walked in the opposite direction without haste, without drama, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. For him, it wasn't extraordinary. It was necessary. As he walked away, he felt the inner weight shift. Not disappear. That never happens. But rearrange itself, as if something old had finally found rest. He felt no pride. He felt a suppressed sense of relief. He felt the strange sensation of having fulfilled a duty that no one asked for, but that needed to be fulfilled nonetheless. The climax of the story wasn't the act itself. It was the silent decision to act, despite from the past. It was the choice not to hide in that one moment when silence alone was not enough. Thomas returned to the darkness of the city with the same discretion with which he had always lived. The world would continue without knowing exactly who he was. And that was fine. He never needed to be seen. I just needed to pay attention. And when necessary, present. Silence returned, but now he was carrying something different. It carried purpose. The night passed without announcements. There were no sirens. There were no headlines, no loud conversations the next day explaining what almost happened. The town of Millbrook Falls woke up as it always did, believing that the world remained predictable, that the natural order of things had been maintained by chance or luck. Thomas Hale knew it wasn't luck. He was sitting at the kitchen table when the first ray of sunlight streamed through the narrow window, slowly touching the worn wooden surface. He watched the light advance inch by inch, as if carefully measuring time. The kettle was still cooling. He wasn't in a hurry for coffee. The silence that morning was different. It wasn't the tense silence that had accompanied him since he returned from the war. Nor was it the empty silence of sleepless nights. It was a stable silence, sustained, as if something inside him had finally found a foothold. Thomas took a deep breath, feeling the air fill his lungs without resistance. No memory flashed through his mind at that moment. No image from the past tried to impose itself, only the present. He stood up and opened the front door. The street was quiet. A car drove slowly past. A neighbor walked his dog. The city continued to lively, oblivious to how close it had been to something it couldn't name. Thomas watched everything, as he always did. But now, he observed, without the crushing weight of constant restraint. For years he believed that silence was merely armor, a way to survive without falling apart. In war, silence had been a tool. At home, it became a hiding place. Now, slowly, it was beginning to transform into something more honest. He walked to the city center that morning, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to feel the atmosphere, to read the human mood, to confirm what he already suspected. People were different. They couldn't explain why. They just felt it. Some conversations ceased when he passed by. Others continued, but with less implicit disdain. Some glances carried restrained curiosity, others silent respect. No one approached him. No one asked anything, and that was exactly how it should be. Thomas never wanted to be recognized. I simply wanted to ensure the mistake wouldn't be repeated. He sat down again on the park bench, the same one he'd used so many other mornings. He observed the details he always observed, the way people walked, how they held each other's shoulders, how they looked away when they didn't want to be seen. The world remained predictable for those who knew how to look. But something inside him had shifted. The past still existed. The memories of the war were still there, organized in silent compartments that would never disappear. The friends who didn't return. The decisions made in seconds that changed entire lives. the weight of having survived when others didn't. None of that was erased. But he was no longer in control of every move. Thomas realized this when he heard a loud laugh from across the square, an ordinary laugh, without any real malice, and his body didn't react with immediate alert. There was no automatic tension. There was no anticipation of threat. Surveillance was still in place. Exhaustion, no. He stood there for a long time, just breathing, observing, letting the silence fulfill its new function, to integrate, not to isolate. As he returned home, the sky began to change color. Soft, unhurried hues. Thomas walked with the same measured pace, but now there was something almost imperceptible in his posture. A slight adjustment, an inner alignment. He no longer needed to disappear completely. It also didn't need to take up space. He was exactly where he needed to be. That night, Thomas sat on the porch. He did nothing but watch the street darken, the lights coming on, the houses retiring, the city falling asleep, unaware that someone, once again, had ensured it could sleep in peace. Silence returned. But now it wasn't a defensive silence. It was a conscious silence. A silence that carried a choice. Thomas closed his eyes for a few seconds, not to escape the world, but to confirm his presence in it. He felt his own body. He felt time. He felt the strange, rare sensation that he didn't need to be at war with the past that night. He opened his eyes. The world remained the same, but he didn't. And that was enough. Because some people don't exist to be seen. They exist to be observed, to understand, to act when no one else notices that something is wrong, and then return to silence without demanding recognition. While the city slept, one truth remained firm, invisible, and definitive. A truth that never needed to be spoken aloud to be real. Never underestimate those who observe in silence.